I'm Dr. Joseph MT, Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. This is E-Pathshala Project on Religion and Society. We are going into Module 16, which is Religious Performance as Spectacle. Now, many of the religious performances can be looked at as spectacles, as mighty kind of stage shows and things like that. So religion is not just a private matter, it's a public performance. And how can some of these performances looked at as spectacles involving large kind of visual and media imagery? This is what we are looking at in this module. Understanding performance. The term performance is broad and can include artistic and aesthetic performances like concerts, theatrical events, and performance art, sporting events, social, political, and religious events like rituals, ceremonies, proclamations, and public decisions. Certain kinds of language use and those components of identity which require someone to do something. The concept of performance thereby enables an assessment of the ways in which individuals act and react in the world. It is a means of understanding how people situate themselves in the world, for themselves and for others. Performance studies provides an opportunity to examine how people act and react in society. Performance studies is interdisciplinary, drawing from theories of the performing arts, anthropology and sociology, literary theory and legal studies. The performative turn in the social sciences acknowledges how individual behavior derives from collective, even unconscious influences and manifests as observable behavior, both overt and quotidian, individual and collective. Catherine Bell writes that in the last several decades, the sociological study of religion has increasingly focused on the actual doing of religion. Therefore, the item performance in the sociology of religion explores religious activity in terms of the qualities of human action. The meaning of the word performance, however, is somewhat ambiguous. It may be defined as the action or process of carrying out or accompanying an action, task or function. Performance has also come to mean the enactment of a script or score, as in the theatrical play or music recital. More recent uses of performance, however, emphasize a type of event in which the very activity of the agent or the artist is the most crucial dimension of the event itself, instead of being only complementary to it. Within this repertoire of meanings, religious studies uses the language of performance to stress the execution of a pre-existing script for activity. For example, conducting a traditional church service, or the explicitly unscripted dimensions of an activity in process, for example, the nature and quality of the church service. Performance approaches seek to explore how activities create culture, authority, transcendence, and whatever ways in which it happens. Hence, by virtue of this underlying concern, performance theory analyzes both religious and secular rituals as orchestrated events that construct people's perceptions and interpretations. Intrinsic to the concerns of performance studies is a fresh awareness of human agents as active creators of both cultural continuity and change, rather than passive inheritors of a system who are conditioned from birth to replicate it. Therefore, performance theory avoids the arguments that rituals mold people to maintain the status quo, and instead looks at how people themselves fashion the rituals that shape their world. The notion of performance gained popularity in the 1960s. At that time, several well-known sociologists and anthropologists such as Erving Goffman, Victor Turner, Stanley Tambaya and Clifford Geertz began to use this terminology as a means to sidestep the mind-body or thought-action dichotomies that previous approaches to the study of ritual had imposed. Recent anthropological works that Richard Schechner highlight the connections between ritual and performance art. According to Erving Goffman, a performance may be defined as all the activities of a given participant in a given occasion which serves to influence in any way any of the other participants. When an individual or performer plays the same part to the same audience on different occasions, a social relationship is likely to arise. Thus, for Goffman, performance is imitative or mimetic. In other words, daily life bears a dramatic structure because each of us is an actor who plays certain parts in front of a believing audience of colleagues, acquaintances, family and friends. Goffman called this disposition a front, a posture one employs to convince someone else of something or to earn a certain social standing. For example, when a person becomes an adult, he or she is actually adopting the prescriptive behavior of adulthood that is applicable in his or her society. Turner believed that social order depended on rituals and ceremonial performances. However, unlike Goffman, who highlighted the mimetic nature of performance, Turner argued that performance implies creation or poiesis in comparison to mimesis. He saw culture as being a constant state of change as members of the culture negotiated common beliefs. In his search in the late 1960s, Turner began to see a universal theatrical language at play in the various cultural rituals he studied. He determined that all groups, be it the Dembu people of northwestern Zambia or tree painters in medieval China, perform rituals that dramatize and communicate stories about themselves. They all, for example, engage in some form of coming-of-age ceremonies, exorcism rites, or warfare behavior which contains a theatrical component and which enable the actor to achieve a change in stature, manage crisis, or give birth to a new state of affairs. Turner noted that such rites tend to occur in a liminal space of heightened intensity separate from routine life, much like a dramatic theatre performance. Given that these ritual acts exhibit many of the same means of expression employed on a theatre stage, Turner termed them social dramas. Now, coming to Stanley Thambaya, he defines ritual as a culturally constructed system of symbolic communication which is built upon particular cosmological or ideological constructs. Thambaya espouses the performative nature of ritual. He writes that ritual action in its constitutive features is performative in three senses. Firstly, as linguistic performance, wherein saying something is also doing something as a conventional act. Secondly, as a staged performance that uses multiple media by which the participants experience the event intensively. And thirdly, in the third sense of indexical values being attached to and inferred by actions during the performance. Ritual performance relying on dramatic devices like acts of verbal and physical repetition, role-playing, music, dance, props, and established costuming is a codification and transmission of information and beliefs held by particular groups of people. Now, coming to Clifford Geertz, he sees culture as public performance of signs and symbolic acts. In Geertz's view, cultural patterns are means through which people attribute meaning and structure various events in their lives. Therefore, the study of culture, according to Geertz, is the study of the mechanism employed by individuals and groups in order to orient themselves to the world. Thus, the importance of religion as ritual not only provides a code of meanings to the participants of that ritual, but also sets up a frame of observation for the outsider. Now, Richard Schechner has initiated a full-fledged disciplinary study of performance theory. He extends the meaning of ritual as being part of the everyday. Rituals are collective memoirs encoded into actions. Many people equate ritual with religion, with the sacred. In religion, rituals give form to the sacred, communicate doctrine, open pathways to the supernatural, and mold individuals into communities. But secular public life and everyday life are also full of ritual. Great events of the state often combine sacred and secular ritual, as in the coronations, inaugurations, or funerals of leaders. Rituals can lead people into a second reality, separate from everyday reality. This reality is one where people can perform actions different from what they do in the ordinary life. We go to the next section, which is understanding spectacle. In descriptive terms, a spectacle is a public display, or to be more precise, a public event that is notable for its impressive appearance. This definition includes a range of different visually oriented cultural forms, from live theatrical performances to inanimate museum and exhibits, to reproduced images in film and television. No matter what form a spectacle takes, what is most important is that it is watched or seen, with the most spectacular events drawing the largest audiences. Within industrial or post-industrial cultural and state formation, spectacle has been appropriated to describe appearances that are purported to be simultaneously enticing, deceptive, distracting, and superficial. As Bas Kershaw writes, spectacle seems always aimed to produce excessive reactions, the wow factor, and at its most effective, it touches highly sensitive spots in the changing nature of human psyche by dealing directly with extremities of power, gods, monarchy, regicide, war, terrorism, catastrophe, and apocalyptic now. The dominant forms of spectacle change over time. Poetic performance was an important type of spectacle in ancient societies, whereas modern societies are dominated by reproduced spectacle, such as that of television. The concept of the spectacle is most closely associated with the work of French Marxist Guy Debord, who in 1967 characterized post-war consumer capitalism as the society of the spectacle. While it is now common to use the term loosely to dismiss visually distracting entertainments, Debord had a very specific definition of the spectacle as a social relationship mediated by advertising and other mass media images. Karl Marx's concept of fetishism of commodities. In the society of the spectacle, the commodities rule the workers and the consumers instead of being ruled by them. The consumers are passive subjects that contemplate the reified spectacle. According to Debord, there are three different forms of spectacle. Number one, the concentrated spectacle is that which is associated with concentrated bureaucracy. Debord associated this spectacular form mostly with the Eastern Bloc of communism and fascism. Every aspect of life, like property, music, and communication, is concentrated and is identified with the bureaucratic class. The concentrated spectacle generally identifies itself with a powerful political leader. The concentrated spectacle is made effective through a state of permanent violence and police terror. The second one is the diffuse spectacle. This is the spectacle associated with advanced capitalism and commodity abundance. The diffuse spectacle is more effective than the concentrated spectacle. The diffuse spectacle operates mostly through seduction, while the concentrated spectacle operates mostly through violence. The integrated spectacle, which is the third type, is associated with modern capitalist countries. According to Debord, the integrated spectacle goes by the label of liberal democracy. The spectacle introduces a state of permanent general secrecy where experts and specialists dictate the morality, statistics, and opinions of the spectacle. Section 3. Understanding religious performance as spectacle. From the above discussion on performance and spectacle, it will be clear that a crucial part of religion is the performance of a ritual or practice in the public to create a visual impact, or to transmit a web of meaning to the insider participant or the outsider viewer. This is similar to theatrical events and spectacles. Performance of public namaz by Muslims, for instance, is intended to convey the sentiment of Ummah or the collectivity of Muslims worldwide among the namazis, to reiterate the traditional practices of prayer in Islam, to imbue a linguistic commonality of all Muslims reciting Arabic verses from the Quran, and to communicate to the observer the nature and quality of Islamic collective praying. It is inherent in religious performance to create a spectacle. For example, festivals create not only an intensity of collective emotion but also a visual effect. A religious festival provides opportunities to observe the communicative system conveyed through complex performance events. According to Beverly J. Stoelzer, a festival prepares a communicative scenery for manifestations of ethnicity and cultural unity with the special objective to demonstrate and experience a particular identity. Therefore, a festival is a cultural performance which is scheduled temporarily and spatially, bounded, programmed, characterized by coordinated public occasions and heightened occasions of aesthetic expression. Catherine Bell writes, ritual has in common with the theatrical performances, dramatic spectacles, and public events the performative dimension per se. that is, the deliberate, self-conscious doing of highly symbolic actions in public, is key to what makes ritual, theatre and spectacle what they are. For example, in medieval Europe, the most important public events, with the exception of the political and the civic events such as coronations, were often religious spectacle. These ranged from processions to Advent, celebrations to public penitence to Saints' Days festivals. Morality plays, passion plays, Pentecost plays, and nativity dramas all serve the role that television and film do for today's audiences. Invoking awe is also one of the key elements of religious spectacle. In her comparative study of medieval contemporary portrayals of the crucifixion, religious studies scholar Alison Griffiths roots the religious spectacle in just this sense of awe, calling it one of the essential design aspects of religious spectacle. Joel F. Harrington writes how the combination of ritualistic performance and spectacle was sought to control the masses and instill a sense of discipline by punishment. In the medieval era, public executions were meant to accomplish two goals. First, to shock the spectators, and second, to reaffirm divine and temporal authority. A steady and reliable executioner played the pivotal role in achieving this delicate balance through his ritualized and regulated application of violence on the state's behalf. As Michel Merbeck writes, with respect to public executions, the community insisted that the spectacle be edifying, not as a lesson in the majesty of the law, but as a drama of Christian repentance, purification and salvation. Religious performance as spectacle is manifested in a very dramatic fashion in shamanism. A shaman is a person regarded as having access to and influence in the world of benevolent and malevolent spirits, who typically enters into a trance during a ritual and practices divination and healing. As Richard Schechner writes, the word shaman is of Tungus or Siberian origin. It can be argued that in the strict sense, shamanism belongs solely to North Central Asia and perhaps via the land bridge once linking Siberia to Alaska to the Americas. But as a practice and theory, shamanism occurs all over the world. Originally a practice of hunter-gatherer peoples, shamanism is today found in agricultural, industrial and post-industrial societies. In certain ways, shamans are very much like stage actors. Both shamans and actors play many roles using both stock and new means of expressions. Shamanic narratives most often center on a life and death struggle against powerful opponents, placating the keepers of the dead, fighting a disease, exorcising a demon, overcoming a spell that is threatening an individual or an entire community. Always there is audience participation. In shamanic healing, the one afflicted by disease is passive, sometimes barely conscious. In shamanic performance, entertainment is integral. The efficacy of the cure or exorcism depends on the excellence of the performance. For the healing to succeed, the community's attention must always be grabbed and focused. Energies must be enlisted and directed. Another kind of religious performance is found in acts of terror by Islamic jihadists, for example. As Mark Jugendsmeyer writes, religious terrorism can be as performance violence, illustrating that performance violence is planned in order to obtain tangible goals, and also to theatrically enact and communicate an imagined reality. The scenario that underlines the performance of religious terrorism is often one of cosmic war. Some religious terrorism could also be motivated by scenarios other than cosmic war. The idea of warfare involves more than an attitude. It is ultimately a worldview and an assertion of power. As Diana Taylor writes, when people refer to September 11th tragedy, they usually refer to that awesome spectacle of pity and fear, so brilliantly executed by the suicide pilots and so efficiently delivered nationally and globally by the US media. It is noteworthy to examine the role of religious performance in seemingly secular societies such as the United States. As the sociologist Robert Bela has argued, while some have argued that Christianity is the national faith as the generalized religion of the American way of life, few have realized that there actually exists alongside of and rather clearly differentiated from the churches an elaborate and well-institutionalized civil religion in America. American civil religion is a non-sectarian quasi-religious faith that exists within the United States with sacred symbols drawn from national history. It has been portrayed as a cohesive force, a common set of values that foster social and cultural integration. The celebration of the 4th of July or Independence Day is a near religious performance in this context. Conclusion, Module 16. In this module, we have looked at the concept spectacle. Now, a spectacle can be cultural, it can be political, it can be religious. We have looked at very specifically religious spectacle, that is, the religious performances as spectacle, which is very kind of very magnificent in that sense and attracts a lot of attention. Thank you.